MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com. Expand your skills. Improve yourself. Get a free 10-day trial of all lynda.com has to offer at lynda.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we thought as one of the ways to wrap up 2014, it would be fun to take a look at Apple and its products and where they're going to go next. We know where they've been because that's kind of what we've done all year, what we do all the time. But where they can go, where they should go, where you want them to go, where it makes sense for them to go. And to do that kind of examination, I needed two deep thinkers, and I couldn't think of better people than the two panelists we have for this MacJury. So without further ado, first up, we have Santa Claus, or excuse me, Mr. Ken Ray. I get confused by the hat, Ken.
Yeah, sorry. Well, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you like.
Yeah.
I have to wear a hat. It's cold. I have to wear a hat. So I was either going to wear a beanie, or I thought, yeah, why not be seasonal?
Sure, I like it.
Yeah, there you go.
I like it. And maybe pick up a little extra cash from by letting kids sit on your lap.
No.
No. Okay.
No, it's just no. For many reasons, no.
It was just a thought.
Yeah.
And also joining us, of course, is Mr. Mark Fuccio, the man who has all the answers, or at least we hope he does.
Oh, boy, I fooled you.
It's good to see you.
This should be a fun show.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I think it's been a couple of years since I've been on one of these shows with Ken. I think it's way back when, I think right around the time of, I think the first Apple v. Samsung jury award. So that's 3 years, I guess.
We did the Beats show, though, where we weren't supposed to talk about Beats, but we did.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know whenever the two of you get together, it's like just this massive amount of brain power and wisdom and intelligence. And so here we go.
I don't know. I've been suffering under a holiday brain for the past 2 weeks, though, so I'm not sure what I can give you, but we'll see.
What is holiday brain? Define holiday brain.
I've been done for like 2 weeks. I've actually still been, cranking out shows and stuff, and hopefully they've been quality shows. But seriously, every day it's just like, when do I not get up and do this for a couple of days? And those days start as we record this. Those days start tomorrow. So you're getting one of my last hurrahs.
Good. So just one last effort before we do it.
No, I got one more after this, but then okay. 3 days of nothing.
Good.
But eating, drinking, and being merry.
Good.
Excellent.
Lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
Well, so let's start out with Apple's product line. And again, the premise here is, no rumors. That's not kind of the point, because we can find any rumors we want to support anything. But where do we want things to go? Where does it make sense for them to go? And I guess the place to start is probably Apple's biggest selling product, the iPhone. What happens in 2015? We're almost inevitably going to get another iPhone. What does it need to be? Mark, you want to start this one off?
That's really an interesting question. I think this year it seems that the 6 and especially maybe the 6 Plus have been a big hit. Depending on whose numbers you believe, I think people are predicting that sort of the product mix, the 6 Plus is maybe 50% of sales. Which is a gigantic hit. It'll be interesting to see what happens when this quarter's numbers gets released, to see, if there's any significant share shifting and, Apple pulling people away from some of the Android, particularly some of the larger Samsung devices. So I think that we'll continue to see more of the same in terms of more powerful processor, slightly longer battery life. If they make it any thinner, which they seem to continually want to do, I don't know if that's possible. I think we're maybe pretty much at the limit here. Especially at this point, I'd rather trade, keep the millimeters and give us more battery and give us more battery life. So maybe a better camera. So I think sort of this is the intermediate generation. So typically what they do is they do modest performance improvements. I'd probably go out on a limb a little bit and say I think we might see a refresh of all 3 sizes: the 4.5 inch, of the sort of the iPhone 5S model, as well as bumps to the 6 and 6S size.
I'm sorry, are you saying bumps to the size?
No. We'll see processor bumps and other improvements. But I think we may see that they maintain those three different sizes to appeal to larger set of the market. And maybe they'll update the amount of memory in the base level configuration. But it seems to me that right now they have very very ideal pricing that. They get a big $100 boost for adding a little bit more 16 or 32 gigabytes of memory. So I think they're certainly going to be enjoying that margin. And I don't know if I wouldn't expect to see them drop any of those things.
I was thinking about when we were talking about going through the individual product lines. My immediate thought was they dropped the 16 gigabyte, and then my almost immediately after that thought was no way, because that's how they're getting people to buy the 32 gigabyte. The 64 gigabyte. It's to go from 16 gigabytes, spend the extra $100 for the 64 is not even a thought. It's a no-brainer. And I'm somebody who's always bought the 16 gigabyte because I couldn't justify another $100 for just another 16 gigabytes. I think the 16 gigabyte stays around, and I think it's underhanded and ugly, which is sort of a terrible thing to say, but I think the 16 gigabyte is there to get people to buy the 64 gigabyte at this point, or for the people who seriously just want an iPhone and don't care. I actually had a listener write to me recently, angry with Apple because he wanted to get a 5C for his daughter, and they only come in 8 gigabyte. And my thinking is that's because, the 5C is not for people who actually want a smart. They want an iPhone, but they don't know enough to know why they would want sort of the top of the line or the best of the line, unless what you're looking for is the least expensive, which is what this guy was looking for. But then he was angry that getting the least expensive got him less, which is kind of funny. But I think the 16 gigabyte probably stays if for no other reason than because it makes us go 64. Yeah,
I agree. We're thinking similar directions, and I think that part of that is products and bed choices, and it's sort of what do you want? Do you want a low cost phone? In which case, this is the offerings. If you want something higher, more specs, larger screen, you have to pay for it. So it's that's just capitalism at work. You have to make choices of what is most important to you.
Although you do sort of hate the thought that Apple is, they always say that they want to put out the best product they possibly can. You sort of hate the thought that they're putting out something that really is, for all intents and purposes, hobbled. Both the 5C, but the 8 gigabyte 5C and the 16, you can justify the 16 gigabyte because people have been getting away with the 16 gigabyte for a while. The 8 gigabyte, that really is, that's almost like selling somebody buyer's remorse.
The reason I think they might do away with that is, all the problem that people are having, if all they have is 8 gigs, they're unable to update to iOS 8 dot something or other. So, given how important it is for them to maintain non-fragmented install base, I think they might change. And also, at this point, memory is getting dense enough, and that they can certainly, I believe, afford to do it. So, I don't think it's an economic reason so much as it's a product line optimization and pricing exercise.
I'm hearing both of you kind of put down the bottom level, and at some point, I think we have to say, and Ken, I think you were the one that said they want to put out the best product they can. But the best product at what price? I'm sure they could do some really wonderful things with the iPhone if it were, $1,400, $1,500 or $2,000. I don't know what those things would be, but they could do it. So they're always trying to balance that.
Yeah, but the memory configuration. This year was a revolution as far as the iPhone and the iPad go, because we all got used to an extra 16 gigabytes of memory or the next step up. Costs $100, and all of a sudden they've said, well, no, now you can go what used to be 2 steps up for just $100. And the thing is, it doesn't cost them anything like $100 to even up it twice. I don't think it even costs them $100 to go from a 16 gigabyte to a 128, because memory's cheap, but not from the consumer side. From our standpoint, it's always looked like it's an incredibly expensive thing, and so this year felt like a bargain. Even though it's always been actually, the prices that they've charged for memory have been about making as much money as they can. That's one of the things that Apple is great at, right? And I think it was really smart this year to charge less for the 64 gigabyte because they made so much more money. I mean, the middle of the road phones, anecdotally, are selling so much better than they ever have. Because, I mean, people were fine just going with the 16 gigabyte. And this year they got so much extra memory for just $100 more that it felt like a good plan. I'm not saying that they're not all good phones, but I mean, as Mark said, I mean, you put a few albums on your iPhone 5C, and you actually can't upgrade from iOS 7 to iOS 8, which I assume will be the same case with iOS 9, unless, all of their optimizations and coding make it possible to do it with less space. But, I mean, you pretty much have to keep anything off of an 8 gigabyte phone for it to be able to do what Mark was talking about.
Yeah. I don't know. I keep trying to think of what I would like. Mark, I'm with you. In fact, I ended up getting a case for my iPhone 6 Plus simply because it needed to be a little thicker for me to comfortably hold in my hand. I could
Which case did you get? The Apple case or a third party?
Actually, I ended up with a spec case. There. I think you can see that pretty well.
Yep.
One of the members of my user group recommended it to me that he had it for his 6, and I really like it. If there's a downside to it, it's almost that things are just a little bit too sticky because there's some rubberized ridges on it, and it doesn't come out of the pocket quite as easily as I'd like. For that, I probably should have gone with the Apple leather case. But I got this one, and I'm happy enough with it. I want to see what the next crop of cases, because I really am looking for a kickstand case for this.
Okay.
But that's a whole other discussion. I'm still, as tough as this glass is this time around, I still have those concerns. I'd love for Apple to come out and say, this is a glass that I could have in my pocket and absolutely not have to worry about scratching it if my keys end up in the same pocket. And I don't think that's quite there yet.
No, this is not that, because I've got some little scratches on mine.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of bums me out.
That's what happened. That's what all that Sapphire was supposed to be. And, they took a gamble, and, it was Ken chronicled it, blow by blow in his show and his iChart magazine. So, Apple, contrary to what a lot of people may think, everything doesn't go swimmingly well for them. Here was one gamble that just absolutely backfired.
Right.
But it would be nice to have Sapphire.
Well, Sapphire, you said better camera, and I think I personally think that we're quickly approaching a time when you need to have parity between the two cameras, front and back, because it seems like the whole selfie thing is not going away. I don't quite understand it, but It's just not. What else?
I wanted that thing where you address Siri, and without having to push a button.
Hey Siri.
I don't want you to see. I was trying not to say it because you just turned on somebody's.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Which I thought about doing it. I thought about doing it just to be funny, but
I just
every time I talk about, like, the first time I reported on it, a bunch of people wrote to me like, "Thanks."
Yeah.
So it seems to me that if the battery gets better, if power management gets better, then that becomes a thing that works whether it's plugged in or not. And I think that's kind of important. I mean, part of what Apple has wanted to do, is obviously make Siri better and make Siri a more, integral part of people's user experience. And so, that's kind of a neat thing if you happen to be sitting someplace with your phone plugged in, or if you're using, I guess it's like if you're using a Movi juice pack or something like that. If you're using one of the powered cases, I think, then Siri still reads that as, oh, well, I'm on power. I'm drawing power from something, so I'll go ahead and answer them when they say, "Excuse me, Siri." I would kind of like to see that happen. And it seems like, if the battery gets good enough, then I would think that would just happen automatically with the next phone or the next OS.
Yeah. This starts to cross over into a discussion of the OS, but one thing I'd like to see is that we don't have the blank word Siri, that it could be, I could name my phone whatever I want, and therefore we wouldn't have the problem that we just apparently had. Sorry, folks. That I could say, "Hey, Matilda," and then my phone would respond, but Mark's wouldn't or yours wouldn't.
It was surprising to me when you couldn't change the name, but that might be a branding thing, right? First of all, it's probably easier for it to just know that to be listening for one name to be addressed by. But then the other thing is a branding. You don't want to have to explain to somebody, well, no, I call it Edgar, but it's actually this. it carries the brand all the way across, I would think. Yeah. I mean, so are we talking about Siri as a product? Because I don't understand why it's not on the Mac yet. And that feels to me like something that's got to happen at some point. I don't know if that happens in 2015 or not.
So maybe that's a transition point to talk about Macs.
Let's go for it. And I guess we're going to start out with the OS, which is currently Yosemite.
Okay, so I expect we'll probably see an update, but here's something that here's an idea that sort of has been I've been thinking about on and off for a couple of years, because people have said, oh, well, they're going to come out with a Mac that has an ARM chip in it, and Ken reported there was an analyst named Alex
Ghana with JMP Securities, yeah.
Who suggested that they would change, just for reasons of gross margin. So I started thinking about that and talking to some of my chip design and other friends here in the Valley. And if you look at what's happened, certainly in the Intel processor world, they've all hit the performance wall in terms of the number of gigahertz that they run at. They've been gaining more performance by adding multiple cores. Well, look at what is inside our iPhone. It's a dual-core ARM in the Apple 8 processor, and there's quad-core graphics chipset. So, in theory, Apple, if they want to, they could change. So I did a little bit back-of-the-envelope calculation to figure out, is there really a cost or financial basis to that? And using their Q4 numbers, I figured, okay, so, looked at some of the Intel list prices, for various chips, and figured maybe they're getting 40%, discount. That leads to a price for, an Intel chip of somewhere in the $140, $150 range. Generally, an ARM chip could be had for like $20, $25. So if you look at that, they could save conservatively $100 per processor. If you look at, they sold 5.5 million Macs. That works out to about $560 million of incremental gross margin. Which, if you look at the overall profit margin for the company, that would boost it by 5.6%. Now, that's an enormous amount. Try to put that in perspective. We all remember back in 2012, with the surge of what was it? I guess iPhone 5. Apple's gross margin, popped above 40%. The following year, it was down in 13, and the whole stock market and everybody started going crazy. So, ability to add 5 points of gross margin is absolutely huge. Now, Apple could use it in one of two ways. They could use it just to fatten the bottom line, or it seems that they could also decrease the cost of this hypothetical Mac by couple $100. Sort of at $100 savings. That's maybe about $300 list price reduction. Imagine what a Mac priced at $700 would do. I think we're always seeing a lot of switchers. So I think, this might be a market expansion strategy that they could use to gain more Mac share. I also think, operationally, with Microsoft offering Word and Excel and the rest of their suite, on ARM processors for the iPad, the reason to have separate processors, I think the reason goes away. So, we might see, it would be really interesting to see. I don't know if they would play that this year or next year. But certainly, some of the software people I talk to say that, their Xcode in the past couple of years, they've, really abstracted, almost everything away from the hardware. And interestingly, with Metal, they introduced that in the iPad as a way that people can get closer to the graphics processor. So I'm wondering if maybe that's a reason that, that could be adopted so that the people who need floating point performance could access it through Metal, on terms of some of the GPUs that are, in the Macs. And by doing that, I think maybe this, can mean that they could make this change without having to sacrifice, at the high end, what a lot of the media people use Mac Pros for, which is they need floating point for all their encoding and rendering of video files. So that's what I think might make it more. When you ask the question of what does Apple need to be competitive, I think this is going above and beyond maintaining their current position. And I think actually may put them on the offensive in the ability to actually aggressively grow and seize market share.
You mean? I mean, I heard everything you said, so I get it. But do you think that the key factor is price in that equation?
I do, because I think corporations. Why do we see $400, $500 crap boxes from some of the PC makers? Because that's that's the price point at which companies have forced prices to go. There is we've seen reporting over the past year or two that there are higher end user support costs on Windows than there are on Apple. So sort of if you net them out together, it seems that you could get to a very affordable Mac and could start to displace some of the other gear out there.
It seems unlikely that they would price it down to a level though where they could protect their same gross margin. I mean, I think they might price it down some, but they do still want an air of you're paying a little bit more. Now, I mean, maybe you're paying less more than you used to pay, but you're still paying a little bit more, don't you think?
Ken, that's interesting because I think historically Apple has had that as sort of their cross to bear. But I think right now, if you go out and if you look at building up comparably configured Macs versus their PC cousins, Apple doesn't. The Apple tax, the premium, really seems to have vanished. So I think at this point, I think they want to protect their gross margin, to protect their business, but also being a company that it has this imperative to continue to grow and expand. Where's that growth going to come from? And I think it's going down market a little bit, and I think they can do that, protecting the end user experience, building a fine machine by swapping out processors.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't disagree with that, but I think it's sort of the same thing that we were talking about a moment ago with the memory. I mean, they did not put as much memory in as they could, keeping with their profit margin, right? Mm. I mean, there's still wiggle room in there. I mean, there's an artificial thing that's set up with the memory. It seems to be in the iPhone and the iPad, and it changed a little bit. It got better for the consumer this year, but I mean, there's still sort of an artificial. I don't want to say scarcity. I don't want to say value either because it's valuable. But I mean, they've decided what that's going to be worth, and it seems to me I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're then going to make as much Mac as they can for as little money. Right. I don't think let's make the profit margin 38%. I don't think they're going to stick with the 38% profit margin and say, okay, well now how much further can we bring this down and still be at 38%? I think they're going to say how much further can we bring it down and have people feel like, oh well now this is actually a really good deal. And by the way, we got a 45% profit margin on it, or a 40, or whatever.
Yeah. So actually, So I'm finding sort of my back envelope calculations somewhere between 5.5% to maybe 7%. So they might lower the price.
Forgive me, the 38 was like phones, wasn't it? I'm sorry, that's not Macs. That was ludicrous.
Well, it's who knows? I mean, that's Apple's margin overall. Unfortunately, they don't break it out. So. Yeah. Again, it's sort of simplistic approximation is 38% on everything. Where we know that some of the high end Macs when they get loaded up with memory, they have more margin, so that compensates probably the entry level Mac configs are probably really skinny margin. Mm. But these are the sort of product lines games that they could play. Is because I'm thinking about. Microsoft, you keep seeing these ads for, the tablet that could replace a desktop. Well, it's that ugly thing with a kickstand, and wouldn't you rather have something like an 11-inch or maybe a 10-inch MacBook Air and with a keyboard that's built in, so I think something like that, could really make them more competitive because I don't think that people are really so much in love with tablets without keyboards for a lot of office work.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. I don't know about you, but I'm not really into New Year's resolutions. If I need to do something different, make a change in my life, or start down a new path, I don't want to wait until some arbitrary date on the calendar. At the same time, it isn't bad to have a little reflection, clean out your things to-do list, and reorder your priorities. And making lynda.com part of that process is a great way to open up new avenues and ideas going into 2015. With lynda.com, you get over 3,000 courses on just about any topic you can think of. Audio, video, design, business. You could start out 2015 interested in a given topic, and by May, be able to claim competence at your office or on your resume. Like photography. Learn how to take better photos, then learn how to do more with them in Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop Elements, or Aperture. Or 3D and animation. Start with the basics, then learn creating textures and shapes, then put them all into motion. The list goes on and on. Learn because you want to, or learn because you need to. There's no better way to learn than by watching, and watching experts do their thing. Experts that you've heard and seen on Mac Voices. Experts like Rich Harrington, Tom Negrino, and Deke McClelland. And when you're watching these experts, you're watching high-quality, professionally recorded video and audio, not something done in the basement by someone who starts the show off with, yo. I've used lynda.com courses to keep up to date on WordPress, the software that keeps the Mac Voices site running, to improve my understanding of graphics, and more. And I have trouble keeping up with all the great new courses that lynda.com adds every week. Join me and the millions of people all over the world who use lynda.com to up their game for personal or business benefit. But don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself by going right now to lynda.com/MacVoices to get a free 10-day trial of lynda.com. And I need to be clear on this. This is 10 full days of access to everything lynda.com has to offer. No courses held back, no limited time on each course. Watch for an hour, or watch as much as you can pack into those 10 days. At the end, I think you'll understand the depth and breadth of the lynda.com library and the difference it can make for you. Get started right now and make yourself better in 2015 with the 10-day free trial available at lynda.com/MacVoices. And let me know what courses you pick for your free trial at chuck@macvoices.com. I might want to take them right along with you. lynda.com/MacVoices, and you've got 10 days of training on whatever you want, free. What a great way to start off the new year. Thanks to lynda.com for their support of Mac Voices. I guess I keep looking at this. There are a couple things there that came out of those discussions. I don't see anything wrong with Apple pricing things at the level at which they can sell them. And there seems to be a faction of the media out there that seems to think, oh, this is terrible. If Apple's taking advantage of you if they have, Ken, your 45, 48% profit margin.
Wait, really quickly, that was a made-up number. I'm basing that on, that was, it was a joke number for all intents and purposes.
Yeah,
ahead.
I realize it, but there is a faction out there that seems to think that any significant profit margin is ridiculous based on the competition, because the competition...
Damn communists.
Well, the competition is not making any money, because they've done that rush to the bottom thing, and now they can't figure out why. And Apple has successfully resisted that. And I guess it's funny. My gut reaction was almost like, oh, I don't want to see it drop too much, because is that then going to lose the perceived value? And is it going to squeeze Apple for whatever the next innovation is for 2, 3, 4 years down the line, that they won't be able to maintain the profit margin and still do the innovation that's necessary?
So the other thing I would think about maybe on this is, if you sort of converge sort of the Mac and the iPad line, is what if you had an option in the Mac, you had an LTE chip, so that in addition to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, you could have that, and if you're out on the run, if you're at an airport or at a McDonald's, you can dial into LTE or Wi-Fi, and it's all in one self-contained unit instead of having they certainly made it easier maybe to do a hotspot to your phone. But that may or may not be benefit compared to just having this one device. They've certainly blurred the line, right? That you could think about. They have one device that you converge a computer and a phone. So I'm really thinking and fantasizing here a little bit. I'm not quite sure what Apple will do. I don't think they do anything that big, but I do believe that they would like to continue to grow market share, and certainly by having $100 of manufacturing cost, or a couple $100 of end user price to play with, that gives them the ability to optimize and bring things forward. Because if you notice, the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro, each of the past couple of years, they've dropped it about $100 for entry level configuration. So I think we'll see something like that continue, and I don't think we'll ever see a $500 Mac. Just like I don't expect we'll see a $250 or a $300 iPhone. I think that there's some intrinsic quality levels and functionality levels that Apple just won't step beyond. But I think certainly in the Mac space, I think that there's some innovation they could do with processors in order to lower the selling price point and tap into a significantly larger market.
Ken?
Yes.
Well, obviously, we need to protect price points. What do we need in the way of performance? Do we need to see performance boosts at every level again on these Macs, or do you think we've reached a point that outside of the folks who do video production, outside of the folks that maybe do some audio work, do we really need more? I mean, listen, we all lust after it, but I think it's almost a nature of the fact that we've been in the market so long, we're always going to lust after that next megahertz or gigahertz or whatever. But
I think for most users, I don't think they really care. I think it's more about the screen, the resolution of the screen, battery life. I think price point. I think these become more important factors than whether it's 1.4 or 1.6 gigahertz, i5 or more on the desktop. Because I don't think people can really see and test that anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, it's going to happen. I almost feel like that's. Let me just say, do we need more? No. I mean, it doesn't need to be appreciably faster, but it's not like they're going to stop trying to make it faster, and people are going to want whatever the fastest is. People who can afford it are going to want whatever the fastest is. So, I mean, it's sort of an interesting question that you ask. I mean, do we need it? Doesn't matter because we're going to get it. Right? I mean, so
okay.
I don't think anybody's waiting around for a Mac to get faster at this point. I think people are always looking for the best Mac that they can get for the amount of money that they want to spend. I assume that's true of most computers. I mean, I don't imagine that there's anybody going, oh, no, this $250 netbook or whatever. We don't do netbooks so much anymore, but this $250, $300 thing is absolutely the best computer I could possibly get. I mean, they want computer for money. They want, as much computer as they need for as much money as they want to spend. And I don't think, I mean, unless you're talking about like a gamer or like somebody, like you say, somebody who does video or something like that, I think Mark's right. Most people aren't stressing about how fast it is. I mean, it's more how current it is and how much is it going to cost me and how much is it going to cost to run. Although they don't even really think about that much, I don't suppose. Which is how my mom ended up with a netbook. I mean, for years. And now she has an iPad because she's dropped computers entirely now. I think she pulls out her little tiny netbook about once a month to do something. I can't remember what. So does it have to be faster? No, but it's going to be.
So given that, is the way to compete in software? I mean, we started, I think we did the transition with Siri coming over to the Mac. So do we get more voice recognition? What new features do we want that Apple could develop that would not just be the obligatory, oh, we've added 200 features, but would be real selling points?
I think adding Siri, really would be, because I mean there is an option for dictation on the Mac, but it doesn't have the interactive capabilities that Siri has. So I think converging that would be a great step. I suppose, I mean, really sort of the overarching theme from which I'm looking at this is, I think that that they will start to converge even more the product line. So certainly in terms of interface, I think we've had sort of the back to the Mac and the iPad or iOSization of OS 10, and we saw that at WWDC last year when with handoff and continuity. That I think those are a little bit superficial. I think they could do more if they unify in terms of some of the hardware platform underneath, and then they could have better ways to put Siri and these other things, so that ultimately it becomes a question of an Apple device is an Apple device. There's a lot of thematic elements, from maybe the thing on your wrist, to your pocket, to your tablet, to all these different sizes. And really, I think the thing that will differentiate them at the most top level is the size of the screen. And the size of the screen, I think, will plug into what your use case is for them. And then obviously you'll have different interface differences depending on whether it's a touch device or a mouse and keyboard based device. But I think they can unify as much as they could the software environment across all of them. Because one of the things we've talked about before on the show is, as Apple is growing, it becomes a battle of the ecosystem. So how do they continue to add value within their ecosystem? And I think part of that is they need to unify it so that overall it's more compelling, from tiny screen to big screen.
I think things like continuity are going to help with that. I mean, when you're right about the screen, but I think that the screen is both going to become, it seems like, more important and less important. It's going to be being able to use whatever screen you happen to be in front of,
right?
Or being able to use whatever screen happens to be around. I have not yet, and this is one of the things I plan to do over the Christmas 3 or 4 days that I take off, is install Yosemite on my Mac. So I'm not getting the full continuity thing yet, but I think making continuity better, making continuity more prevalent, and then actually getting the word out about it, making sure that people understand it. And then also, maybe this happens with location awareness once we all start wearing Apple Watches, assuming we're all going to start wearing Apple Watches, or maybe you can do an if this, then that, but that gets a little confusing. I want my iOS ecosystem to then be smart enough to know which of these screens that it should send it to. I've noticed over the past couple of weeks, there have been these articles turning up, how to turn off phone calls on your Mac. Right. I mean, and I love the idea of it. I think continuity is a fantastic idea, that I can just be reached on any one of these devices. So how do I make it easy to not be reached on all of them? And so if I've got like if I'm wearing an Apple Watch, say, can that act as an iBeacon? Enough of an iBeacon that my internal Apple ecosystem knows, well, he's near his phone, so we'll ring it on the phone. Or, oh, his phone's in the other room, but he's sitting here with his iPad, and I can tell that, because the iPad sees the Apple Watch and they both don't see the phone. So I'll go ahead and send this here. I mean, it's sort of that's, and I'm not being very coherent about how I'm saying it, except I would like continuity to get a tiny bit smarter, rather than it ringing all over the place, or rather than, my SMS messages going to everything that I have, having it go to the right place without me having to go, okay, well, now I'm over here, so don't send it to those two places. Or, I don't know where I'm going to be, so send it everywhere.
I think you're being surprisingly coherent, because continuity.
Thanks, Chuck. Surprisingly coherent.
Well,
trying to lose the hat. Now I can be serious.
Given that you were putting yourself down, I was trying to boost you up.
Oh, thank you very much. Well,
you can put the hat back.
Now I've lost my hat. No, it's okay. I got another one over here. It's all right.
No, I think continuity is a great idea. I think it may be an example of one of those features that everybody thought they wanted, and then when it came, it's like, well, maybe not so much, because one of the big annoyances, at least for me with continuity, is I like having everything ring around me. It's a little bit much, but it's okay. Mm-hmm. But then when I answer it on one device, it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
On the others, my iPad is still ringing in my backpack. My Mac is still ringing, and the people on that I'm answering the phone with say, what's all that racket? Well,
yeah,
it'll stop in a minute.
My wife and I have different schedules, and so I actually tend to work later in the night and sleep a little bit later in the morning than she does. She gets up in the morning, she starts texting people at work. She's in another part of the house, and her iPad is making noise every time she gets a responding text, and that annoys me personally. So I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, and there's that possibility, with everyone, and then take that to a work environment. somebody might be sending you something that they don't necessarily want another coworker to see. I mean, there are any number of reasons and it's a great feature. Don't misunderstand. I think it's a fantastic feature. I would like for it, and through all the location aware stuff or the proximity aware stuff that Apple is working on, that everybody's working on with beacons and the Internet of Things thing. There's no reason that can't be refined going forward, and I feel certain that it will. I mean, unless it was a total crap service, but I don't believe that's the case. I think people do like it. There's kind of annoyed that's like, oh, wow, all over the place, huh? How do we make that a little bit better? So
yeah, no, I think that's something that they can do. So I made sure I put my phone into airplane mode before we got on here, so we didn't hear any interruption, because it is useful. I know around the house it's been useful to be able to have the phone in one place, and you can pick up a call and not miss it. But it is embarrassing if I'm at a client and a phone call comes in and the Mac starts to ring like crazy. So I think these are a little bit of controls that can be added.
You know what's fascinating about this conversation so far? While we're trying to go product by product, it's harder. It's difficult to go product by product because of what Apple is doing. As far as I mean, it really is one giant ecosystem, as opposed to now you can make this work with this thing. I mean, not to use the old phrase, but it just works. I mean, and whether it works well or not, it just works. I mean, it happens,
and it all works together.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Sometimes whether you want it to or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I was having a similar thought that my intent when we started this was, okay, we're going to do this, then this, then this, and it's almost impossible to do that because it does seem to cross over.
Yeah,
a lot.
Which is super neat. No, it's fantastic. I mean, that's. I believe that is. I've used this analogy before. I mean, when you watch Star Trek: The Next Generation, Riker is not tapping his communicator, which I'm actually wearing one because I'm such a geek. Riker is not tapping his This actually isn't a communicator there, because somebody might say something. This is actually a badge from the new movies. But I am that much of a geek that yes, I'm just wearing it around.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's who I am and how I roll, for better or for worse.
At this time of year, it could be a snowflake. I feel much better with you wearing that badge.
Oh, good, yeah. Riker is never tapping his communicator and then having somebody go, oh, I didn't get your message because I'm running a different operating system. You know what I mean? I mean, they're able to, everything just works. It's like one big holistic system in all of the futures that we look toward. I mean, maybe in some of the dystopian science fiction written by William Gibson or Neil Stephenson, you have the whole thing of like, well, he was running this operating system, so he didn't get this or whatever. Generally speaking, the thing that we're theoretically aiming for is everything just works without you having to think about it. And Apple seems to be closer than anybody else in that respect. I know you can do a lot of this stuff with Google. I know there are a lot of great things about how much stuff that Google stores in the cloud. I know there are fantastic things about if I drop my, Google phone in the toilet or my Android phone in the toilet, I can pick up another one, sign in, and there's all my stuff again. Of course, Apple has that too, as long as you're backing stuff up to iOS or backing stuff up to iCloud. But yeah, I mean, it's the way that people have always wanted it to go, even if they don't realize it. We get fixated on screen size, we get fixated on speed, but really all we want is for the whole thing to happen, to just work. And Apple is approaching that, it seems to me.
I would agree with that. The one thing that, and I'm going to take your Star Trek example, and don't write in, folks, we know it's science fiction, okay? But I think that there's this interesting challenge going on between trying to give people the choices that they seem to want and options, as opposed to saying, and people don't like to be told how things work, but as opposed to saying, look, this is the way it's going to work. Because that would be so much easier and so much simpler, I think, both for Apple to produce and perfect, and for a lot of people to use, right up to the point where it doesn't work the way they need it to or want it to. And then they want that little switch, that choice that we crave. I mean, it seems like I don't know if it's personalization or whether it truly is a difference in the use case. But if Apple, every time Apple tries to impose their will on people with this is the way it should work, people say, well, no, but this is the way I want it to work, or this is the way it should work. And then you have everything break down.
I'm not sure. Forgive me. I'm not sure what you. I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, what I guess I'm saying is that if you were told, okay, this is how you can listen to your music, and I'll make it simple in this order. Okay, you can't. No more shuffling playlists. This is the way you're going to, or maybe better example for the computer is this is the view of your files that you're going to have. It's either going to be you won't have any options. It's always going to be the file you worked on last is going to be at the top of the list, or
right.
it's only going to be icon view, because that's the way we think it should be visualized. And then people have a stroke and say, yeah, but I need to be able to sort it by alphabetically or drop things into folders or whatever. That's where the problem comes. It's the darn human users. It's the problem.
Yeah, no, I think, if you explain it that way, I think it's true. I mean, people really want their devices to be flexible to their own styles, and sometimes it's maybe a control thing. I mean, certainly there's no shortage of podcasts of people talking about how they geek out and personalize every single aspect of their Mac. That's great. I mean, that's the power of the Mac, that people can do it. But at the same time, standard issue will work very well for people. And I think that's where things like Siri and some of these other things, will start to help enhance personalization. I've noticed, I think on iPhone 6, that it does learn a little bit predictively. For example, if I type Drobo, it would always correct it to something, but now it seems that it's learned, that is a word, even if I misspell it. So I think that sort of responsiveness or ability to learn is going to become increasingly part of our systems. I think right now one of the best things Apple could do is update, add a Bayesian spam filter of things to their mail app, make other things like that a little bit friendlier. Because I think maybe that's a point of a different discussion. What should Apple be doing in terms of the application space? Because I think some of their apps are fine, and others are just falling behind and just seem a little bit rigid and inflexible.
Can I really quickly on that though? I mean, when you were talking about personalization earlier, and now to what Mark is leading into, to me, personalization of your iOS devices, at least, and I guess this would be true of the computer as well, is the App Store or the Mac App Store. And that doesn't personalize the look, but there are people who are fine. I'm one of them who are fine with the mail that comes on the iPhone. I'm okay with it. I've done a couple of things to change it. I'm using SaneBox. Okay, so fine. I'm using SaneBox, so that takes care of one thing, but otherwise the way that mail works is fine. There are plenty of people who don't like the way the mail works on that, and so they've got, they're using Google Mail on there, or Gmail, excuse me, or they're using any of a number of. The world seemed to get so excited about some mail client that came to iOS earlier this year, and I can't even tell you what the name of it was, and I can't tell you why, because the mail that comes on my phone is fine for me, but for some people it isn't. So they can go to the App Store, or they can go online and they can get these other things. I'm fine with Siri. There are some people who prefer the Google's whatever thing that they have. Google Now, I guess, right? Is it Google Now?
Google Voice, Google Now, yeah.
Google Now on the Android, yeah.
And so they can go out to the App Store. I mean, they can make the experience their own to an extent. Can they change the layout of the keyboard? Well, actually, yeah, now they can. They haven't been able to this point. It took a very long time for that to happen, but now they can. There are some things that Apple, I think, is probably always going to leave the way Apple wants it to be, because they're like, this works and this is how you're going to do that. But if you don't want to, there are 900,000 apps on the App Store. I don't remember if that's the actual number or not, but it seems like it was approaching that at one point. There's a ridiculous number of apps on the App Store. So if this doesn't work exactly the way you want to, go out and find something else that does. I mean, they're still going to protect sort of the back end of it. They're still going to protect. I mean, I think it's a bigger pain for developers, honestly, than it is for consumers, because
sure.
If there's anything you want to do with your phone, if you can't find 100 apps to do it on the App Store, then you probably need something like Apple plus IBM, because what you want is really, really, really specific or really personalized.
Right. So I think along those lines, I think sometimes a lot of people seem to talk, well, Apple wants it this way or that way. I have a different view. I think it's more of a cause and effect view. I think a lot of their teams are just not very deeply staffed, and they tend to want to move people around if necessary. So a lot of times I think it's not that they don't want to do something, as there's nobody working on it. and certainly they don't publicize a lot of their inner workings. So I think that's why you see things like this. And again, back to the unification theme, right? Just look at Numbers, Pages, and Keynote. What was it, a year ago in Mavericks, the uproar of, they took away all this Apple scripting and they took away all these features. And then everyone got all these paper cuts of every month getting a new update and slowly adding a lot of that capability back in. So, I think the good news is Apple is making changes. The bad news is, unlike Microsoft, they will draw a line in the sand and say, anything before this, tough luck, move on. We're not going to support it. So, depending on your outlook, that's either great because it means we get constantly new stuff, or you think it's heresy and you're walking away from your users. And I think, unfortunately, again, there are trade-offs, and Apple is constantly looking forward. And I think personally, it's a good thing that old old formats die and get replaced.
I'm with you on that, Mark. And I'm about to get myself in real trouble, but I'll do it anyway. I think that sometimes some of those people that are holding on to the old machines and trying to keep them running are older in age. Not always, not by any means, and sometimes they're businesses that maybe can't afford the latest and greatest. But for the most part, people that are not doing anything new with their Macs, they're not doing anything new with their Macs. And so they're not excited of the new capabilities or anything. Once in a while, something may come across their radar. It's like, oh, that'd be nice to use. And then they find out that they can't do it, and then they get a little upset. And I think it's the people that are adopting to the new things, that are changing the way they do business and the way they do their projects, are the ones that are experimenting. And Ken, pardon me, I'm with you. The mail thing. There were all kind of mail apps all of a sudden that were going crazy earlier this year, because you swipe one way, you swipe another, you flick this, you tap that, and it was supposed to help you prioritize your mail, I guess, curate your mail, keep on going with your mail, and maybe people are still in love with those, but I don't hear about them anymore. And I know, frankly, I tried a lot of them, they just didn't strike a chord with me.
Yeah. Dropbox bought that famous one that was everyone seeming to be twittering and going crazy and getting really excited about this time a year ago.
Okay.
And then I don't know what's happened to it since then. It's just been absorbed.
Yeah. Does that mean that we're all hungry for new solutions? I mean, do we have problems that are not yet solved yet? And then when somebody promises something like that, is that why everybody went crazy over it, or was it just one of those crowd crazy things?
Well, it seems, honestly, I don't know. I was having a discussion with Michael LaPlante, who is on the iChart Radio podcast with me. And he said something disparaging about iTunes. Maybe I am one of those consumers, I guess, that will just sort of take what's put in front of them, I guess. I've never had a problem with iTunes. And I think one of you said something sort of disparaging about iTunes earlier. I'm not going to defend it, but I have nothing bad to say about it either. I mean, could it be nicer? I guess. But I mean, I know how to use it, so it works for me. I'm not going to freak out if they change it. Well, that's not true. I actually did freak out a little bit earlier this year when they changed it because they hid podcasts, and it took a minute to go and find them. And that's kind of an issue because, I mean, where I'm a podcaster, I would like for them to be as discoverable as possible. And so the fact that, I mean, I appreciate the fact, thank you very much, Apple, that I can go and put this on the screen. But what I, as a podcaster, need from Apple is for them to put it not front and center, certainly, but I need for it to be, something that's automatically there, because Apple took over podcasting a number of years ago. And so if you're going to take it over, please don't then hide me in addition. So I will freak out a little bit when they change iTunes, but it doesn't strike me as a horrible thing. And I know a lot of people who absolutely hate it. So I mean, maybe it's not just that we're all hungry for the next new thing, but I mean, if you're a hardcore iTunes user, or if you have a certain idea about how iTunes should work and it doesn't, then you're always going to complain about it. If you have a certain idea about how email should work and it doesn't, then you're always going to complain about that. I'm very particular about Twitter clients. I don't know. I don't know why, but I am. There are two that I really like, and the rest of them I can't stand. So maybe it's just that. And then, certainly there's a bit of buzz that's generated every time. When you have a significant number of people who say mail sucks and it needs to change, and then somebody comes out with something, then everybody starts tweeting about it, then everybody else starts tweeting about it, and it becomes a story for like a day.
So how much of this is just sort of groupthink, that some opinion leaders or people with audiences or readers says mail sucks or iTunes suck, and that just gets internalized and repeated, whether it is true or not.
Not to unduly promote another show that I do, but on iChart this weekend, that's actually Mike LaPlante. That was his homework for the past week. He said that iTunes stinks, and we had this whole discussion about, I don't understand why iTunes stinks. I don't want you to tell me right now. I want you to think about it. And next week, I want to hear what you would change about it, because I've heard it a million times. And so I'm curious to see what he comes up with. And then, of course, if anybody wants to write in and say why as well. But because you're right. Nobody tends to say. I doubt anybody was waiting. Oh man, if I could only like just swipe that email to the left and it would disappear. That doesn't really seem like a reason to change your entire way that you do email. Right. Maybe it does become a groupthink thing, like you say.
Yeah, or would just becoming curmudgeons. They changed it. They moved it from here to there. I think a lot of it is just maybe these are things that people may have no opinion about, and something comes out. Yeah, that is right. That is a problem. And then hence, excuse me, may become an assimilated belief and take off.
Our time is moving along so fast. I just looked up and it's like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And I definitely want to touch on the iPad. The discussion with Ken and Mark kept going and going as we examined all sorts of different angles for Apple, tech, and the future. So we're making this a two-part Mac Jury. Look for part 2 coming soon. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.